First of all, thank you so much for listening to my album. Intuition has been my favorite personal project so far. Coming up with and developing these ideas has been a lot of fun and really pushed me in terms of my production and composition. While working on these songs, I had the idea to write down a little bit of information or trivia, if you will, about each one of them. How I made them, what I used, and any other interesting facts about them. Reboot was one of the reasons I decided to call the album Intuition. I was researching a lot about mental health for artists and just general tips for creatives at the time, and stumbled upon a few interviews with John Hopkins talking about his creative process. I've been a huge fan of John Hopkins' work for a while, so it was wonderful to get an insight into his approach. John talks a lot about letting things go where they want to go, working via intuition. Not forcing yourself or an idea on your work, but rather letting it do its thing. This mentality has been a huge game changer for me and enforced the process of the whole album. Reboot started by me experimenting a lot with Native Instruments Massive. I ended up recording a bunch of takes of me playing around with parameters inside the synth. One of those parameters was the amp, which I controlled with the performer modulation inside of Massive. I sketched this random pattern in, which gave it this robotic, unpredictable but rhythmic quality, and I really like that. Beyond the Stars was the first track I finished for the album. My girlfriend and I were rewatching Stranger Things at the time, and I was inspired to do something in that kind of 80s realm. There's a lot of the Juno 60 synth emulation from Tell You Know on this. I also mainly used plate reverb for the instruments. In general, this track came together so effortlessly. I just kept on having more ideas for the sections and just followed where the music naturally wanted to go. I also absolutely love those little space sounds in the midsection. Those were created by playing around with a very short and plucky envelope in Massive and then sending that through a flanger, chorus, delay, reverb, and automating those parameters. The idea for When the Day Comes came from my love for Penguin Cafe Orchestra and the incredible score for Spiritfarer by Max LL. I always adored the use of dulcimers and centaur in music and their warm but sharp and intimate but noble quality. Additionally, I used two charangos, both penned, for the B section, but my favorite sound probably still has to be that lovely moving lead synth. In hindsight, I feel like the Midnight Wood by Disaster Piece probably influenced that lead sound a lot. I always loved that soft moving, buzzing kind of sound. Icarus is one of my personal favorite tracks of the album. I really love the atmosphere here. I was going through my sample library and found this awesome sample from Splice of a wind chime. I ended up reversing the sample, which gave it this really cool sound, especially after applying a bunch of reverb and a bit of delay beforehand. That sound, for some reason, reminded me of the Icarus mythos, probably also because I recently finished the video game Outer Wilds. Since the album was already headed in that space direction, I felt it was a perfect fit. My favorite part of Icarus is probably the end where the reverse piano gets wider and wider and kind of spins around you really fast. First Falling Snowflakes of Winter Long Gone is a Ray Bradbury reference from one of my favorite books of his, The Illustrated Man. I was sitting on the first part of this track for quite a while. I really loved how that super wide synth sounded, but I wasn't really sure where to take it. I was experimenting with layering in some crackled sounds, and it instantly gave me that dystopian winter kind of feel, so I continued in that direction, manipulating the original sample and morphing it into even more of an ambient piece. My favorite part of this track probably is the mid to end section. I really love how it actually kind of sounds like a growing snowstorm in a way. everlasting. The more obvious Boards of Canada influence aside, even the working title was a BOC-like piano. I always loved when pianos have that almost bell-like, downsampled quality to it. The whole track has a dream quality, almost Lynchian maybe, like a sunrise occurring at night, and I found that very refreshing. Safehaven is heavily inspired by the game Outer Wilds and its wonderful soundtrack by Andrew Pralo. I really encourage you to try this incredible game for yourself. It's definitely one of the best games I've ever played. I wanted to capture a similar feel to the track End Times by Andrew, floating in space, the kind of Erhabenheit sublimity of it. Safehaven started out with me sending a string sample through this really cool granular contact instrument called Granulate. After twisting the various knobs a bit, the outcome instantly reminded me of that kind of stuck in space vibe, so I just kept adding on to that. My favorite sound of this track is probably the piano hit, Pan to the Right. It just has this incredible sonic and emotional impact to it. A Metallic Calm. This track mainly consists of Jogging House samples from the official Jogging House sample packs. I stretched and affected them in various ways to create these atmospheres. I really enjoyed the very straightforward and simple process of creating this ambient piece. Kaleidoscope. This track is a tribute to the short story Kaleidoscope by Ray Bradbury. The main synth is again heavily influenced by the Outer Wilds soundtrack, and I just felt it would be a perfect fit for this track. The Kaleidoscope story is essentially about accepting your fate and coming to terms with your own death. So I knew I wanted to include a clock ticking right from the start. I ended up layering an actual clock sound with a bunch of other percussive sounds to give it more of an impact. Towards the end, I experimented with a really cool surround sound plugin called Ambio to make the track kind of spin around you and in the end even kind of give the illusion that the ticking of the clock morphs into a heartbeat. I really hope you enjoyed listening to the album as much as I did creating it. I really appreciate all the feedback I've gotten for this album. As an artist, it's sometimes really difficult to do something very out of your comfort zone and to do something that's different to your other work. But seeing how a lot of you actually really like these tracks really made me happy. So thank you for that.